Welcome to No Holding Back with me, Susan Estrich. Each week I'll have the privilege of talking with some of the biggest names from the worlds of media, politics, and law. Nothing is off the table. I'll be speaking my mind and encouraging my guests to do so too. We're lucky enough to have today Andrew Feinberg joining us. He's the Washington correspondent for The Independent, and he is just one of the preeminent journalists covering Washington and the executive branch these days. He's covered Congress, campaigns, presidents, and political investigations. He's made significant contributions to political journalism, including being the first to report on the exact timing of the federal indictment of former President Donald Trump in June of 2023. He broke the pivotal story of the Trump White House social media monitoring operation, which alerted aides to plans for violence on January 6th, 2021. His insightful reporting has also graced the pages of Politico magazine, Newsweek, the Washington Business Journal, The Hill, and Communications Daily. His expertise and firsthand experience make him a critical voice in today's landscape. Andrew, welcome to No Holding Back. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
What is going on, Andrew? You had a great story this morning about Biden admitting that he had screwed up. What is happening? Tell us what's going on the inside. I've been upset for a week now.
What is happening? That's a very, very broad question.
I know.
Well, I'll give you the basics. The president knows something went very, very wrong at last week's debate. You have some experience with Democratic presidential candidates giving not so great answers
Yes.
in presidential debates.
A delicate, nice way of putting it. I have experience with disasters.
Yes, and this one, which took place exactly 1 week ago, minus a couple of hours, is far worse than what happened when Governor Dukakis struggled to give a slightly human answer when asked what he would do if his wife was raped and murdered. And I actually think you might have wished that Joe Biden got a question like that, because then he would have shown a bit of emotion and humanity last week. Yeah. But instead, all we really got from the 81-year-old president was a jumbled mass of attempted regurgitation of talking points, facts, and figures, and things that really made it hard for him to be understood, hard for him to keep a train of thought and convey that train of thought, and hard for him to counter what was an endless stream of lies from his opponent, Donald Trump. And it was just an unmitigated disaster, and he knows it. But what is happening now is there is a tension between the, I guess what you'd call the rational course of action in this case, which would be for him to stand aside, and the emotional, which is this attitude that he has, rightly so. I think that he's been counted out before and he's always been underestimated, and that he's going to power through and show everyone that they are wrong about him once again. And so behind closed doors, you have that tension going on inside the head of the president. And that's what's being bandied about by his aides. And in wider Democratic circles, there's really a lot of talk of not if, but when he makes the rational decision to stand aside, and what happens at that point.
Before we get to when and what happens, tell me this. How did it happen? I mean, I know the people who were preparing him for this debate. They are extremely experienced. I can tell you exactly how the disaster in 1988 happened. Bill Clinton and I had rehearsed the answers so many times, and Dukakis simply didn't see the question as the Willie Horton question. He literally answered the question as if it were a question about what is your stand on the death penalty, as opposed to a question about whose side are you on? Are you on the side of the criminal, or are you on the side of the victim? And we had rehearsed an answer. It began with, I know what it's like to be the victim of crime. My brother, this is Dukakis's brother, was hit by a hit and run driver and left to die at the side of the street. My father was the victim of a mugging in his medical office where thugs came in and left him half dead for drugs that they were stealing. I mean, there was a question, there was an answer, and he just didn't see it. But the Biden disaster was much worse, as you point out, because it was the whole debate was like that. And it wasn't just one question that blew sky high. It was a failure to, seem like he belonged on the stage. It was as if this man was in total decline. How did that happen? How did they let him go up there like that? He didn't hit a single question out of the park.
Well, from what I understand through my reporting, and let's be honest, there are reporters out there who are better sourced. There are reporters out there who are not as well sourced as I am. So, I mean, honestly, I put myself somewhere in the middle there. But what I
put
understand,
you a little higher than that. I've been reading everybody, so I think you're pretty damned insightful.
Well, you're very kind. From what I understand, the president spent a week basically doing debate prep in Camp David, and it was a traditional debate prep. It was, as you were saying, a lot of rehearsed answers and a lot of preparation for defending his record with facts, defending his record by explaining his accomplishments and letting people know what he has done. And in a traditional presidential campaign against a traditional opponent, that would be the way to go. Mm-hmm. If Joe Biden had been debating Mitt Romney or Marco Rubio or insert Republican here, that's the way to go. But he was not debating any of those people. He was debating Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, when he is on the debate stage, two things. He lies, and he almost exclusively appeals to emotion. He will say, everything is bad. This is the worst administration ever. And instead of turning around and saying, you're a liar, and we are not the worst, you're the worst, and this is why, Joe Biden kept trying to pivot to defending his record, and it just did not work because he could not get the words out.
It's stunning to me. It's just stunning because when you do traditional debate prep, I heard this week, you'll remember this, many of our audience won't, because it was one of the memorable moments of Lloyd Benson's debate when, he said, "You're no Jack Kennedy" to Dan Quayle. That came about because in debate prep, Danny Effort, congressman who was playing Dan Quayle, gave exactly the answer that Dan Quayle would give. In other words, he gave, the John Kennedy answer. And I remember saying to Bill Clinton before the debate, who was there to spin for us, pray for Jack Kennedy. Pray he compares himself to Jack Kennedy, because Benson's going to eat him for lunch if he does. And he was ready for that. Why wasn't Biden ready for, Donald Trump didn't say anything new. He said what he always says. Migrants are taking over this country. They're taking Black jobs. I couldn't believe some of those exchanges. And why wasn't Biden prepared to, rebut them? 10-month babies being killed, that's homicide. That's not abortion. Why wasn't he ready for that?
Well, I think there are two things that went on here. He was being prepared to defend his record. That's traditionally what you do when you're the incumbent. You talk about what you've done and you talk about what you want to do in the next 4 years if reelected. And he was not prepped in a way that was focused on the counterattack, that was focused on his own appeals to emotion, his own attempts to connect with voters in that way that Donald Trump is so good at, and frankly, that traditionally Joe Biden has been good at. He was prepared the way I think high school debaters and college debaters go into debates, with tons and tons of facts and prepared talking points and prepared material And he was expected to regurgitate that on command instead of giving him the basics and letting him react and counterpunch the way he naturally knows how, the way he did at the State of the Union when he was heckled on multiple occasions. That was what he should have been prepared for. And instead, he was prepared to be Professor Biden, to be a defender of his own administration, Biden. And he doesn't need to defend his administration. He needs to attack the other guy. And he completely failed at that task. And why that was? It was because he has the same people around him who he has always had, who have done debate prep for many, many presidential campaigns. They're very good at it, but they did not know how to approach this because they aren't paying attention to right-wing circles, and they simply don't understand that presidential campaigns right now are not won and lost on facts. They're won and lost on feelings, and they're won and lost in sometimes edited deceptively sound bites and videos that go on TikTok, those 30-second videos, as Karine Jean-Pierre called them, cheap fakes. And they just weren't paying attention to that. They also didn't really think about the visual. President Biden used CNN's makeup artist. And CNN has never, CNN has never had the best makeup artists. At least from what I understand. I don't know that much about makeup. Usually when I go on TV, I do it myself. And the makeup artist, for whatever reason, did not do a great job. Donald Trump is often mocked for the massive amounts of bronzer and orange-hued stuff that he slathers onto his face, sometimes rightly so, but he looked human. He looked like himself. The president looked every bit of his 81 years. Another thing that I understand happened is he was not prepped for the moments when he was not speaking. He was not told what camera to look into. He was not given clear instructions. Donald Trump spent years as a TV personality. He's a showman. He knows where his eye lines are going to be. President Biden did not, and that, I think, is how you got that slack-jawed, vacant look at times. And also, and I say this delicately, the man has had work done. He's had a lot of Botox. He's had a lot of fillers, according to people who I've talked to who know how to recognize that sort of thing. And I don't blame him. Everyone wants to look their best. And if I could, afford certain things at that age, I would probably do what I can to maintain my appearance as I get up there in years. But that, combined with the makeup, combined with not knowing where to look and how to look, it didn't go well. He wasn't prepared for that sort of thing. And this last point I'll make is an important one. When the Biden team proposed the debate rules and proposed muted microphones, that was a massive blunder because the president, one reason he was not able to defend himself and to be himself and to jump in the way he ordinarily would is because he was prepped for muted microphones. He was just not speaking. And when he's not speaking, he had that glassy-eyed expression, and he was getting lost because he was not involved in a give and take. And I think all of these things are small, but they add up to when you're 81 years old and your one task is to convince people that you are vital and vigorous, it adds up to doing none of it.
Is he vital and vigorous? I mean, I think what was so scary about watching him from the beginning was one had the sense, and maybe this is just wrong, that this was the real Joe Biden. This was Joe Biden without a script, without a friendly audience. This was him on his own standing there, and on his own standing there, he just didn't seem up to the job he was running for. Is that the real him, or was it just a failure of preparation?
I think the answer was somewhere in between. The president, you've seen him be good on his feet. You've seen him be ready to respond to questions and to hecklers and to all of that. You've seen it happen during speeches. You've seen it happen during these big set pieces like State of the Union, and you've seen it happen on the campaign trail when he's encountered protesters over Gaza. So he can think and react on his feet. But what I suspect happened is that the circumstances were just not allowing him to actually be on his feet, because it was speak for a minute, pause, let the other guy talk. And if you're like me, then when you're involved in a back and forth, you have an impulse to jump in when you feel you should speak. Mm-hmm. And as you just did, and when you can't do that, and you've been drilled on not doing that, on not even trying, I think that makes it harder for you to show that you're up for it. Now, is the man 81? Yeah. Does he sound or look like he did when he was Uncle Joe, the vice president, or as the Onion put it, the president of Vice, the guy that the Onion loved to show washing his non-existent Trans Am shirtless in the White House driveway, which of course is ridiculous because everyone knows Biden is a Corvette guy. But is he that same guy? No, he's quite a bit older. Is he too out of it to be president? No. In reality, I talk to people who interact with him. He's usually completely with it. He understands what's going on. He understands his job. The governing part of Joe Biden is fully functioning and in high gear. The problem is campaigning for president is not the same as governing. And if you ask me, is he up for being president? I'd say, based on what I understand, yeah. If the president served a single 8-year term, I don't think he would have a problem getting to the end of it, despite the fact that he'd be 86 at that point. But campaigning for president and being president are two completely different things. And I think what we saw the other day is that he is not up for campaigning in the way that's expected of him in 2024.
Can he rescue that? Can he salvage that? I mean, I talk to Democrats. I don't talk to the power elites, but I talk to Democrats every day who have given up on him, to be honest, who have made a judgment about him that I don't see him changing in a 10-minute interview with George Stephanopoulos or however long that's going to be. Do you think he can get past this?
I think there was a moment when he could have pivoted and gotten past it. And it was a week ago tomorrow. It was on Monday. It was on Tuesday in the briefing room when he could have come down there. And I asked Karine, I asked Karine, why can't the president take that 30-second walk from the Oval Office to the White House briefing room? It is literally 30 seconds at best. And he did not do it. And Karine couldn't give an answer as to why he couldn't do it. And I don't think that the people around him want him doing that. And maybe it's because he's not up for it or he hasn't been prepped. He's going to have a full press conference next week when he hosts the NATO summit, and we'll see how it goes then. But I think the moment to right the ship was brief, and based on what I'm hearing from Democrats, from strategists, from others, that moment passed, and it's sad that it did, I think.
Yeah, I remember when Bill Clinton gave the disastrous nominating speech for Dukakis, where his biggest applause line was "in conclusion." He got up the next day and he went on television. I don't know, remember whose show it was. He played his trumpet. He was out there every minute in the days following to clear up his image. And I kept wondering why Biden didn't do anything, why he went to that one rally where Jill said to him, "You got the right answer to every question," which was so ridiculously untrue that it didn't help him at all. And then he almost disappeared behind the criticism. Did they just miss that opportunity? And can they find another one now?
I think they missed the opportunity, and I don't think it's because he's completely incapable. I think it's because what the consistent attitude of the folks around him, at least the ones that I know a bit about what they're thinking, is they don't want to feed the alligators. They don't want him in the briefing room because they don't think that that's necessary. They don't see the press corps as a way for him to get his message across. They've been trying to go around the press corps. They've been going on podcasts and friendly local radio and local television and things like that. And that's fine. There's a time and a place for that, and that's not a bad strategy for the most part. People are getting their media in a lot of different ways, but at the same time, there has been sort of a contempt for the press that's different from what we encountered during the Trump administration. Now, Donald Trump, let's be clear, would call the press the enemy of the people. He would attack reporters in pretty awful terms. He would direct hate mobs our way, both online and at rallies. Not good. Not good at all.
No, not good at all.
But what the man did do that Biden does not do for the most part is engage. He would bring reporters in for interviews. He would speak at length during these gaggles outside the West Wing or the residence before he got onto Marine One. During COVID, he was in the briefing room every day. And as you remember, that didn't end so well for him. He suggested that injecting disinfectant would be a good idea. It's not a good idea. Don't do that. But he, as much as he liked to attack the press, he also enjoyed engaging with the press. Biden, for the most part, does not enjoy that engagement and does not feel that he needs to do that. And I don't understand why, because he was a senator for 30 some years, a couple decades, and the press corps on Capitol Hill was ever present. He walking from his office to a hearing room, there are reporters. You walk back, there are reporters. You're going to vote, there are reporters. And so he knows the importance of engaging with the press and letting us talk to him and letting us hear what he has to say and put our questions in his ear and get responses. And he has not done that for the most part. He's had a few press conferences. Most of the ones that he has done have been overseas, so they've been limited to those outlets that, in essence, pay to play, or they have been these 2-and-2s where he'll call on two pre-selected reporters, and the foreign leader will call on two pre-selected reporters, and the topic is usually foreign policy. There has not been that sort of free-for-all, and I think that has come from a place of sort of contempt for the Beltway press, they like to call us. And you can dislike us all you want. You can criticize us all you want. Certainly there's a lot to criticize. But you know what? When you're avoiding us, it's not a good sign.
No, I've been in campaigns where they've said, no one's talking to X, and X will be the New York Times reporter on the plane. And you want to say, really, is the Times going to stop printing? If we don't talk to them, will they not print any stories? And the answer, of course, is no, they'll just be worse.
Yeah.
And it's such a short-sighted strategy. Tell me, do you think it's inevitable that he's going to step aside? Is he going to listen to the New York Times was reporting that he was listening to Hunter Biden. I found that terrifying. I mean, the member of the family with the worst judgment. Who's he listening to right now, and what's going to happen?
At the end of the day, he's going to listen to the people around him. That includes his family. But even his family has to listen to his other advisors. They don't have to like it, but they got to let him talk. And eventually he's going to have to read the same polls that the rest of us read. And he's not stupid. He does not want to see Donald Trump get a second term. He does not want to see the consequences of that. And ultimately, it's going to have to be processed by him that the best way of preventing a second term for Donald Trump this time is going to be for him to stand down, for him to have his George Washington moment where he puts his ambitions for a longer term in office aside for the good of the country. And if he does that, he will be a hero in Democratic circles. He will be very on demand or in demand on the road. People will want to have him campaign for them because he will be the man who is giving up what no one since Lyndon Johnson and since before that George Washington has been willing to give up, which is the most powerful office in the world. And I just want to add something else in response to your previous question. One of the biggest blunders that this White House has made when it comes to how they deal with the press has been the way that they have derided, attacked, gone on offense against reporting about the president's age. They have made it taboo to even suggest that President Biden at age 81 is not skydiving every day like George H.W. Bush. He's not that there's any reason to question whether he is the same man that he has been and that he was. And in doing that, they confine the subject to right-wing circles with a few limited exceptions. And they made it impossible to even discuss. And when they did that, they created this bubble where a lot of the country was not being exposed to this. When they moved things around, so he was only using the built-in stairs on the big Air Force One. They could have said, we're doing this because the president's 81 years old, and for any 81-year-old, president or not, a fall can have serious consequences. So like any American of that age, the president is taking precautions because the last thing he wants to do is end up hurting himself in a pretty catastrophic way, because that would be bad. They didn't do that. They didn't really talk about it. And to the extent that it leaked out, that's why he was doing it, to keep him from falling. It was reported as they're doing this for optics. They don't want more video of him falling up the stairs, of him tripping. And that's fine. That's normal. No one wants to see their candidate or their principal tripping with cameras rolling. But they didn't have to let it be framed that way as an optics concern.
Right.
The shoes,
right?
The shoes. He's wearing, I think, these, from what I understand, pretty comfortable Cole Haan dress shoes with a rubber bottom. They could have done something with that. They could have had the president, who is known to be a very good dresser, to the point where Roger Stone, of all people, has praised his fashion sense. And he could have gone and done an interview with GQ and talked about, I'm not, as young as I once was. And so I figured out that you can wear shoes that look good and are good for your balance and good for keeping your grip on the floor when you live in a building that has a lot of marble or stone floors, like the White House does. So he could have done that, but instead they just didn't talk about it, and they let it be something that was either reported as just they're trying to avoid the optics of him falling, or other feverish things that went on in right-wing media circles. So there's just so much of this that they could have done to cushion the blow, but instead they created a bubble around him, and it popped last week.
What happens next? I happen to like Kamala Harris. I get along with her. I think she wasn't treated particularly well by this White House. They sort of locked her up for 3 years and gave her the border, which is an impossible assignment. But she's actually a very smart woman who's with it. But a lot of Democrats are worried her poll numbers are even worse than Joe Biden's. Who did the Democrats come up with, and how do they do it?
Well, let's just level set a bit here. Can you think of a vice president who wasn't, I guess, perceived to be mistreated or bottled up by the West Wing?
He was bottled up, I think. He was about as active as you can be.
Yeah, Al Gore felt that way. Joe Biden, I remember when he went on, I think it was Meet the Press, and declared he was in favor of same-sex marriage before President Obama had done so. Like they wanted to, put him back in a tube. He was known as a gaffe machine, and people held their breath every time he talked. Vice presidents have generally not been, I guess, beloved by the principal in the West Wing for many years. I think FDR went through 3 of them. Mm-hmm. So that's not a surprise. Kamala Harris, I actually think the negative coverage that you've seen mostly in right-wing media, some of it racially and sexually tinged, has been or will be an advantage to her if she is thrust to the top of the ticket, because people underestimate her. This is someone who won multiple statewide elections in California, and you can't win statewide elections in California by being bad at politics. And so I think what you have is a lot of awkward moments over the last couple of years where she has been in the impossible box that is the vice presidency. And I think as she's gotten out on the campaign trail more, she's become more and more comfortable. She's gotten more and more easygoing and less stilted and less trying to appear vice presidential or presidential, and more comfortable just being herself out there. I think when people see her as the presidential candidate, they will find her extremely likable. And her poll numbers right now, at least the ones that are forward looking as to how could she do against Donald Trump, she's done better with women and better with independents in polling than the president recently. And I have no reason to think that trend will not continue, especially if she's running head to head against Donald Trump. There was a time when I think a lot of other pretty savvy people would have said, oh God, no. You cannot put a black woman against Donald Trump. Look what happened when you ran against a white woman. It brought out this latent bigotry in the electorate. And I think that when it comes down to it, a Harris versus Trump matchup would be about Trump, not about her. And I think that looking back to 2016 in hindsight, that election was about Hillary Clinton, not Trump. Yeah. And so I think that you would be very surprised. Well, maybe not you, but a lot of people would be very surprised by what happens if and when Joe Biden steps aside and moves Harris up, particularly if she picks someone a little more pale, a little more male, and a little more Midwestern as her running mate. Sort of the dynamic that Obama went with when he picked Biden, but with a different age dynamic because Harris is pretty young, but she's been vice president, so she doesn't need an old hand. She needs someone reassuring and appealing. And there are a lot of people like that out there. Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, Roy Cooper, the governor of North Carolina, Pete Buttigieg, the transportation secretary, actually polls pretty well as a running mate right now. And so I think she would have a cornucopia of vice presidents to choose from if she's the one at the top. And I think it would be a very interesting race to watch.
Is there any way, I don't mean this in a harsh way, but is there any way to avoid her? In other words, if Biden steps aside, is there any way to open this up broader than her?
Technically, yeah. If it goes
delegates, then it's up to the delegates. But in practice, how do you do it?
But in practice, I mean, there would be an open convention. Jim Clyburn has suggested what he's described as a mini primary process, but I'm guessing that would be maybe sort of a bunch of resolutions among the state parties expressing a preference. I don't know how that would work in practice, but it would come down to the delegates, and it would also come down to some cold, hard monetary math, which is the Biden campaign has raised a boatload of money, and there are two people in the entire world who can legally spend that money in an election. One of them is Joe Biden, the other is Kamala Harris. So unless the party wants to start from zero, it's Harris. That's just how it is.
And do you think that's what's going to happen? If you're looking in your crystal ball, Andrew, because your crystal ball looks to me pretty good, just having listened to you for the last half hour. I agree with everything you've said, and it's been a little bit surprising, especially in terms of how badly he was prepared for this debate. But it seems like you're on the money. Is that what's going to happen?
I mean, I'm not going to say with absolute, what's the word, the phrase John McLaughlin used to use, complete metaphysical certitude or something like that.
There's no such thing as that in politics.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say 100%, but I'm gonna say with each passing minute, it becomes more likely than not that Joe Biden stands down, finishes out his term, and does everything he can to elect his vice president to succeed him. And if he does that, if he pivots and he goes all in, the party will follow him. And there's a good chance that the American people will follow him that way also.
And is he a sure loser if he keeps at this?
I see a sore, or not sore, but a sure loser, as sure as your guy lost to Ronald Reagan all those years ago.
One of my guys, yeah. One of my guys, yeah. One of them lost to George H.W. Bush. One of them lost to Jimmy Carter. I've had a lot of losers in my life. One of them lost to Donald Trump. And I predicted all of those, including the Trump loss. So I think I'm with you. It's very sad to say because I've known Joe Biden for a long time and I like him. And I used to call him Uncle Joe back when he was in his 40s. And he was Uncle Joe to the rest of us in campaigns. And he was always a good and decent man. And that's why I think it was so painful to watch him on that debate stage.
I agree. For a lot of people, it was very painful and very troubling and just sad to watch. And what happens now will be decided on, 1 square foot of real estate. That's Joe Biden in his head. But he's going to be looking at the same numbers that you and I are looking at. probably better numbers because they have their own internal polling, which we don't get to see. And he's not going to make an emotional decision at the end of the day because the stakes are just too high. And one last thing, I think the Supreme Court in that Trump immunity decision, I think had they gone a different way, there would be more of an outside chance that he could and would pull through this, that he would just push it aside and power through to November and see what happens come what may. Yep. But that decision having come out the way it did, giving the president that sort of blanket immunity, I think it forced a lot of people's hands in terms of thinking about this in a zero-sum way, because it is now a zero-sum game. And I do not think that he will stay in knowing that he could be handing the White House to Donald Trump on a silver platter.
Andrew, you've been a phenomenal guest. I've learned a lot listening to you, and thank you so much again. I hope you'll come back before the election as we see this play out, because I'd really like to get your insights again.
Anytime.
You've been listening to No Holding Back with me, Susan Estrich. Thank you to Andrew Feinberg for a great conversation. Tweet us at No Holding Back FM, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share the link on social media. You can sign up to receive an email when a new episode drops at our website, noholdingback.fm. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time on No Holding Back.